perfectly. So hi, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Anna and I will be your host today on behalf of Product People. We Product People are a German-based consultancy and we help companies efficiently develop great products. So how we do that? Well, first of all, we help our companies our clients feel a temporary gap in their organization, a temporary need. And we do that by acting as interim, aka freelance product managers. We also help our customers with advice through our consulting services. We help them obtain product profitability and growth. And last but not least, we like to share our knowledge in the field by offering product management trainings. So if you or anyone you know would be in need of such a service, please remember we're always happy to help. And furthermore, together with you, we conduct these weekly meetings. And today, as always, we have a guest who will talk to us about an exciting topic from the product management world. Discussion, which will be then followed by a Q&A session. And at the end, we invite everyone on Zoom for an unofficial networking event, which will not be streamed. It will be just among friends. So today, we have the pleasure to talk about how to eliminate our own biases and increase stakeholder buy-in with our guest, Adam Kropf, Head of Product and Development at Texada. So Adam, thank you very much for joining us today. We're very excited to learn about this topic, which consists of such vital aspects like eliminating our biases, which is important in product, it is in life, and also by obtaining stakeholder buy-in, because who are we without our stakeholders, right? So Adam, thank you very much. We're very excited for your presentation, and please, you have the stage.
Awesome. So I'll share my screen here once you stop sharing. Perfect. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, today I'm going to be talking about why you should always show your work and how this can help you eliminate your own biases and increase your stakeholder buy-in. So first, a little bit about myself. My name is Adam Kropf. I'm head of product development at Texada Software. So we're in the B2B SaaS space, and we're specifically an ERP for the equipment rental industry. So a lot of the things I'm going to be sharing today are probably skewed a little bit more to the B2B space, but I'm sure there's some tidbits in there that can also be helpful for those who are working in the B2C space as well. So a little bit about myself. I started off in product marketing, and as the first marketing person in our company, we're about 50 people or so. And as a product marketer, I started asking some questions: who's our core customer? How are we differentiated from the competition? And why do people buy from us? How do we decide what we're going to build next? And what does this whole process look like? So I was new to the software development world. And as I started asking these questions internally, I received a lot of ambiguous answers or a lack of clarity around what we were building, who we were building for, why we were building it. And, it kind of accidentally started doing that myself. So started gathering feedback from our different internal stakeholders, started talking to customers, trying to really answer these questions. And I accidentally became a product manager and then formally transitioned roles into product management from there as well. And since then, I'm now head of product development. I've hired multiple product managers and owners and designers and development teams to really build out that vision. So as the first product person in my company, I definitely made a lot of mistakes along the way. It's funny, I was talking to Anna just before we started the call here, and she asked if I had, background in psychology to like how I was presenting this from. And I said, no, it's really just presenting from my own experience and where I made mistakes. So hopefully you guys are able to learn something from where I went wrong. And I'll try and highlight those landmines that I stepped on as we go through this. So has this ever happened to you? You may have executives, you've got sales, you've got customer success, and they all got ideas for features, and they all believe that their feature idea is the most important thing that you guys should be tackling right now. I know I've had it happen to me, and most of the product people I've talked to have definitely seen that. Or you may have made a product decision and you know it's right, but you can't really put your finger on exactly why it's right. Or you're launching new features that you're so confident in, and then you get crickets. There's no real impact to the user or the company. And then if all these things keep happening, your frontline teams are obviously going to be questioning your prioritization. Why did we build that? Nobody wants that. Things like that. So today I'm going to be covering why you should show your work. We're going to be talking about how you can recognize and remove your bias through your decision-making process, ways you can increase your stakeholder engagement, and then also how to show your work. And hopefully through this, you're going to learn how to combat all these scenarios and provide some tangible ways to work around those. So first off, why should you show your work? I'd say this is probably the biggest mistake I made early in my product career, and something that it took a long time to come back from. So hopefully any aspiring product managers in the group here will be able to avoid this. But as a product person, as the central hub for a lot of information, I'm gathering information from different people, customers, internal stakeholders, informing decisions, and I'm executing on them. But I didn't always do a great job of showing empathy for the internal stakeholders in the company. So I'm talking, again, stakeholders about customer success, sales, executives. They're talking to customers, they're informing their own position, they're learning about problems, and then they're providing potential solutions. But as a product person, it's our responsibility to not only show empathy for our users, but also these other people who are dealing with these problems every day. So part of that is making sure you are listening. Again, all too often it can feel like product is a black box. It's, we throw all this feedback in, but then we don't see anything from it. So the more you can show your work as you're going through, the more engaged they're going to be, and the more bought in they're going to be into your overall product goals and visions and objectives. And trust is something that's earned. It's not something that's commanded because you have a product manager title. It's something you need to earn early, and the earlier you earn it, it pays a lot of dividends over the coming months and years. And it's a really big difference as a product person when you've got engaged stakeholders, when you've got teams that are bought into what you're working, than when they're actively working against you because they just don't trust you. They don't believe you're making the right decisions. Second, why you should show your work is so you can find your own hidden biases. So Amazon is famous for this, where they won't allow slide decks. Instead, they use a 1-page or a 2-page memo to really lay out a situation and provide all the context necessary. Something I found personally really helpful is when I actually write out a product decision or a feature epic, I try and put as much context as possible right into the epic. We use Jira as our issue tracking software. So in the epic, I'll put in the use cases, the business context, the impact to the end users, and why I feel that this is important to the company, to the product, to our end users. And I found that as I write things out, I can start to actually take a look back and look at which data I used to inform this decision. And it also helps me understand how we're going to measure it once we launch it as well. And then the third one is, if you're showing your work, it makes it super easy for you to actually align your product decisions to the North Star metrics. And we'll be talking about how we present internally a little bit later on, but going through and being able to say, hey, this product decision is tied to this outcome or this goal can really help to move you along as well. So yeah, so first off, we're going to jump into some cognitive biases. This is a slide with way too many biases on it, and definitely nobody's going to be able to read that. I don't expect you to. And this is just to demonstrate that there's so many biases out there. Some of the best things that you can do is actually spend time learning about them. And one interesting fact is, biases can be so harmful to your product decisions or really any decision-making process in general that Google during their hiring process, they actually have a one-pager which lays out the most common biases during interview process that every interviewer needs to read right before they do the interview. And they've noticed that it's significantly reduced the bias in the hiring process, which has led to them getting the best candidates possible. If you want to learn more about that, Laszlo Bock's book, How Google Works, is really, really good about like the inner workings of Google. And it talks about it in there as well. So in preparing for this presentation, I'm a member of multiple product management groups. So I threw out a survey and said, hey, which biases do you think are the most common ones that you see product people tripping over, or really software development companies tripping over as well? And these were the top 4 that kind of came up through the different groups. So the first one, recency bias, pretty straightforward. Whatever's just been asked for is suddenly top of mind. Some feature request that's been made months ago, kind of drops off because you're not as close to the context where you receive that feedback, or, out of sight, out of mind if you're not properly managing your overall idea backlog that we'll be talking about as well. Next one up is your frequency bias. So, something that's asked for a couple times in a short period of time suddenly becomes everybody's talking about this. It's the most important thing we should be working on. And you'll see these types of requests around things that are cyclical. So, for example, if your software has anything to do with accounting, your year-end process, you'll get requests around that. It only happens once a year, and that's when you're going to get the requests. And just because they happened in a short period of time, suddenly it feels like maybe you need to drop everything and jump on those things. But you also want to evaluate it objectively. What is the ROI from this feature? What's the impact it's going to have to our company and to our products and to our users? Next up is your confirmation bias. Again, there's a lot of talk in the product communities about confirmation bias, especially how it affects your user interviews. So there's tons of great content on how to conduct good user interviews, the basics of asking open-ended questions, avoiding leading questions, and really just allowing the user to speak and not putting your own, I believe this is the most important thing, and asking them directly if they want that. Because if you pretty much ask any user if they want a feature, most of the times they'll say yes, because they don't have to weigh it against any other trade-offs. And then the 4th most common one here is bias for building. So sometimes it may feel it's way easier to just add this parameter, or just build this additional workflow, or add this piece. But everything you add to your product is going to add complexity, which over time compounds into a really hard to manage product as a user, really hard to support product, and really isn't a good thing, especially if the new things you're being added on are only used by a couple customers. Then it becomes one of those things where it's hard to both kill the feature and it's hard to keep the feature. So instead of just saying, we're just going to build it, spending that extra time to validate can lead to a lot better product over time. We also had a couple honorable mentions here. Sunk cost fallacy, really common in startups. We've already started down this path. We've already put all this effort into it. We're already going really hard in this direction, and it's too hard for us to change direction, so we're just going to continue. And that can definitely lead to not only a lot of waste within a small, medium, or large organization, but it can kill a startup where companies are too dedicated to what they're working on. And Slack is a famous example of this, where they start off building a video game, and they just weren't getting the traction, they weren't getting the adoption, and they could have continued charging down that path, or they could pivot into this side thing that they worked on, which was their internal messaging service, which then led to obviously a multi-billion-dollar company, which is now bought by Salesforce. The authority approval bias, again, this is also referred to as HIPPO, your highest paid person's opinion, where you just go and follow, whatever is going to get approved. The CEO has this pet project, so you're just going to build that, or this executive, really likes when we work in this area, so we're going to work on that. It's not really prioritizing against what's going to be highest impact. It's not really prioritizing against trade-offs. It's just taking a super lazy way out. And the last one is the focusing illusion. So, if you're really drilled into one area of your product or one area of the problem space, suddenly it becomes the biggest problem, becomes the most important thing to work on. this can become more prevalent in like customer-centric companies where, you're talking to a couple customers or a specific customer and you're going super deep with them. And then suddenly it becomes the most important thing. So how can we recognize our own biases? So the number one first step, to pretty much any process is recognize that we're vulnerable to bias. Early on, it may feel like, I'm not biased. This all makes sense. We're building this. But just taking that step back and saying, you know what, I am vulnerable to bias is the most important thing. Second thing is to learn more about different biases. So I covered off 7 and I showed you that there's probably over 100. But just taking some time to learn about a new one each week and then look for examples of it both in your own work and in the work of people around you. I know as I started learning about biases, I could actually recognize why some people were advocating for certain things. And over time, we started talking internally as a company about biases and how we can share things and create that common language, and then again creates that trust. There's this really cool company called The Thinking Shop, and they're just a non-for-profit organization. And they actually have these cards which have a bunch of different biases on them and fallacies. And again, not that we're probably meeting too much in person right now, but they can be used in a group setting when we are able to meet in person again, and kind of go through some different biases and provide examples of each. And again, just create that shared understanding and that shared knowledge within the company. A big one of how to find your biases, which we talked about a little bit before, is really putting as much information as you can into any product artifacts. So your feature epics, asking some basic questions. What impact will this decision have? How are we going to measure success? Providing references and content for things that you are, that led to that decision. And it can also help you examine why you made that decision. So great for spotting biases, especially like frequency or recency. Because you're like, how big is this problem? How prevalent is it? Can we find support tickets for it? Can we find multiple notes from different customer interviews? Is this something our competition's offering? Any supporting data you can bring together is always going to be impactful. And the reason why you want to, drill in and get all this data together is that you can actually engage your internal stakeholders in a new way. So like we talked about before, it's really important that you do this early on. And the better foundation you have for trust, the better your decisions are going to be received later on as you go along. So if you have the low-level impacts of not properly engaging your stakeholders, means you're going to be missing on potential insights from customers. So again, these are team members who are talking to real users just like you are. And if they don't feel they're being heard, they're going to stop raising it. They're going to stop advocating for their customers. And really, we don't want to end up in a situation where people with valuable information aren't sharing it. And then the flip side is when you start rolling out features, it's these frontline teams are the people who can get that feedback for you at scale. So if they're working with a company, then they can say, hey, have you tried using this? What did you think? Is it solving your problems? Is there anything that it's not solving for you? You can get that real-time feedback loop at scale. You're one product person, maybe you have a couple of product managers, but then your frontline teams are 3, 4, 5 times as many people as you are. So you can help get that information back. I'd say a high impact of not engaging your stakeholders is that you can end up in some really tough spots. So as a personal example, we took the whole company to an offsite. Again, we're about 50 people. And before the offsite, we all read the book, Good to Great by Jim Collins. And one of the core concepts in there is confronting the brutal facts. So we did that as a company. We started laying out what the brutal facts were. And at the time, I was trying to roll out a new product to a new market that we hadn't served before. And brutal facts was definitely an understatement. It became very clear that there was areas in which the product was missing the mark, that it was really difficult for our internal team members to roll it out. And it helped me recognize at that time that I was kind of diminishing or devaluing feedback from internal teams that, hey, this is really hard, or hey, we're seeing these problems, because they're just so focused on just getting it out the door. And it really created a pretty negative environment, which then I had to spend a long time coming back from. So it can be a pretty rough time if you're not engaging properly. So let's open up the black box of product management to the wider team. So one way you can do this is through collaborative user interviews. So I recommend inviting different team members to sit in and just be a silent observer, introduce them, hey, Mr. Customer, this is Joe from our customer success team. He's just going to listen in and see what you're saying, and see if he can help me learn some things about this as well. And a great thing to do after that is to have a quick debrief with your team members and see what insights they gleaned from this conversation. This is also great activity to do with developers and designers and anybody else who works on the product but isn't necessarily customer facing all the time, as it can help them get better context on the decisions they need to make every day as the product's being built. And then whenever possible, share your recordings and notes. It's great. Again, we talked about providing supporting evidence into your epics. I've linked notes and user interviews directly into the epic as well, so we can revisit those product decisions in the future and see why we did or did not make a decision. Another great way to engage your internal team members is with dot voting. So you can lay out all the features you're considering on a board with sticky notes. You can open up a free Miro board and then give each person a color, a name, and then they can actually drag those dots onto the different sticky notes. It's not that this is something that is going to be a majority rule, so it's not whatever gets the most votes is what we're going to build, but it helps you understand how people in different parts of the company are thinking about the product and thinking about the problems that your users are facing. And then the best thing you can do from there is actually drill into, why did you focus on this? So you may find some really surprising feedback, like one salesperson really wants you to build this feature. Why is that? Why are they so passionate that they put all their dots on one thing? And that allows you to find information you may not have had before, and you actually drill in and ask those questions. Again, your frontline teams have a lot of information. The more you engage with them, the more you can learn, the better decisions you can make. And it also helps remove your bias. You can also run product talks. So in our company, I started what's called Let's Talk Product, and it's every Monday at 4 p.m. because we also have teams in Australia. So it allows them to come in early morning and our teams late afternoon. And it's a great time where you can share the work in progress. You can conduct design critiques. Great for receiving real-time market feedback. So we always leave time for Q&A. What are you seeing in the market? What are you hearing? Is there anything you see happening more? Anything we should be considering? As well as you can use it as a time for doing a sprint review or doing your demo sessions, walking through, hey, this is what's in this release. And this is how it works. And you can get a lot of people to become advocates of the feature of what you're working on, and again share that with your customers, because that's going to be a lot more impactful when it comes from a real person as opposed to them reading about it in the release notes. And sharing your roadmap internally. Again, this is pretty common knowledge. A great way that I found to be successful is starting off with, what is the goal? What is the high-level product vision? What is the North Star metrics we're going to be working towards? You want to share in more detail kind of what's in like the near term. So maybe what's being worked on this month or this quarter, depending on your sprint cycles. And then kind of what higher level ideas are being considered for the next 3 quarters. Again, always with heavy disclaimers, this is always subject to change. Don't communicate this to customers because things can always change as new information becomes available. And then probably the most important thing you can do is share the things you considered but didn't prioritize, and whenever possible, share that why again. So, we have these 100 feature requests, and we prioritize these ones, and this is why, because this is how it ties to the overall product vision. And these other requests we think are still valid, but they're not what we're working on right now, and here's why. Again, your stakeholders don't have all the context that you may have about why you're prioritizing certain things. And the more you can share with them, the more they're going to be engaged. And also engaging externally. So again, probably more possible in the B2B space than it is in the B2C, where you may have millions of users, but you can still get that core group who you can engage with. It drives loyalty for your product, and it builds trust in what you're building. So the first way you can do that is through an idea community. So we use a tool called Help Race, and it's very inexpensive. People can self-register, add ideas, and then they can also vote on other people's ideas as they're going through. It's great for learning about business impact. So something that maybe you think initially your hypothesis is that nobody really has this problem, or just one customer does, but then all of a sudden it gets tons of votes. And it gives you that area where you can drill in, and it gives you actual users saying, hey, I have this problem. So if you do start going down the route of interviewing them, you know who you can talk to. Downside to it is it requires some time investment. So going through the new requests, linking them to existing requests, or removing duplicates. And then also, if you're not engaging with them in this in the tool, then customers may say, hey, I put this idea in, but it's not getting built. Why? I put this idea in for a year and it's still not built. And again, so being able to communicate the expectations of the community, and then them actually being able to see, yes, they put in a year ago, but it's not really getting any votes, and these other ideas are getting tons of interest. It also helps on that side as well. You can also set up a customer advisory group. So this would be a smaller group of people who are specifically engaged around the product. It's great for recruiting users to interview. And when you actually engage with them, they actually feel like they're a part of the product building process, and then they become more loyal to it. You want to bring in your key customers. Ideally, you have a smattering of different people within that type of company. So again, for us, we have everybody from accounting to service to sales. So trying to bring in different voices, and then also customers in different segments of your market and different geographies to get a good mix. And it's really important how you frame the conversation. So this isn't a support call. We're not getting on here with 30 other people so you guys can complain about what's wrong with the product. You're joining here as industry advisors, as advocates for what you're seeing in the market every day, as opposed to just being just being a support call and complaining about things. It's also, you need to be very careful that you don't try and use it as a sales or marketing tool. So it's not like, hey, here's this new product, buy it. You may talk about new products, you may show new features, but if they feel like it's just a call where they're going to show up every month or 2 months and just be sold stuff, they're not going to be engaged, and you're not going to get the value from them. And remind them that you have the right to remove members. So, setting up expectations and how they should act within there is always a good thing. And last but not least, there's been tons of great success with the recurring product events. So some people have referred to this as a product launch. Salesforce does Dreamforce every year. They had 170,000 people sign up in 2019. I'm sure it's even bigger when they went virtually in 2020. And you can either tie it to specific product launches, or you can do it quarterly or annually. Right now, Texada, we're doing it annually, but we may start going to a biannual cadence. And we got a ton of engagement from our users for it, and the recording was watched even more than the live session, as people started to hear about it, and we promoted it through our newsletter. And we were able to present recent updates to the product, which gets people excited. We had a couple quick demos of different parts, and we kind of said, hey, this is where we're going. And it provides clarity and insight to end users and to companies about where you're going. Sometimes it may feel in a big product that there's not a lot of movement, but this again just draws focus to the innovation you are working on. And just to kind of wrap it all up in a little bit of a bow, we've kind of gone through why you should show your work, how you can recognize and remove your biases, ways to increase your stakeholder engagement, both internally and externally, how you can show your work, and hopefully you're able to avoid some of the landmines that I hit early on in my product career. Thank you very much for sitting through with me, and would love to answer any questions you may have about any topics raised through the talk.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Adam, for this very interesting and insightful presentation. Thank you for the tips. And I had no idea there are so many biases. So I'll get right to studying them. And I think it's a great advice, like you said, to take one daily or perhaps even weekly and read about it and yeah, get to know it and recognize it in your own behavior. So, yes, everyone, you're welcome now to ask questions. You could ask them verbally or in writing in the chat in Zoom. Or if you join us on YouTube or Facebook or Twitch, please post your comments there and we will gladly ask them to Adam.
Sounds great.
Nice. Thank you, Anna. If you don't mind, I go first.
Please.
Hi, Adam. I'm Alice. I'm a senior product manager at the operational VC. And what is interesting to me is like stakeholder management is an exciting topic, right? And it's very important. However, many people who come to the job like product managers, you know, we don't get like a formal education about the project management, right? And stakeholder management is kind of part of the project management. So what would you, from your experience, what are the main pain points? What is the main need from the people to motivate them to, you know, to educate themselves about the techniques from like how to engage with the stakeholders? So maybe any fuck ups like in your personal career or what you have observed, like people not engaging with the stakeholders and how like where is that led to?
Yeah, for sure. So I talked a lot about some of the challenges I face when not engaging very well with internal stakeholders. And yeah, like I said before, it can really drive lack of trust, and then people start going silent. So that's definitely a big part of why you want to do it internally. But with customers, I find it's very important, especially if you're playing mid-market or enterprise. You know, there's a phrase that enterprise customers don't churn; they actually fire you as a solution provider, because it's not like they can turn on a dime. They're not, you know, moving hundreds or thousands of users from one platform to another quickly. So it's not like a normal churn cycle. They actually fired you because you're not doing your job. So either it means your product isn't solving the needs, or they don't think your product will ever solve their needs in the future. So that's where a lot of those things like the customer advisory group or the ideas board, sharing the vision, sharing where you're going, can build that confidence. And then encouraging dissent. So one exercise that I haven't run yet, but it's something I wanted to try is within, you know, any groups that are engaged, if you had a magic wand, what do you wish the product did? Because it really helps you uncover adjacent problems to the problem space maybe you're in. I've done this on a small scale before, and actually some of the times our product did it, but they didn't know or they couldn't figure out how, which also was a great insight in terms of discoverability, because obviously your features are only as good as they are able to be discovered. So working on that, and that can be around communication. But yeah, your customer engagement can be really impactful, both to informing your own knowledge and your own awareness of the problem space, as well as driving revenue and retention.
Cool. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, any other questions? Kate is saying that the magic wand question is super effective. Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Alice, for the question. Adam, do you have any advice on engaging stakeholders and internal stakeholders in really large companies? Because in that case, it's hard to create visibility and keep people up to date. Would you have tips?
Yeah, so the most scalable thing is those product talks. So one tip I didn't talk about on there is sharing in advance what's going to be discussed. So are we talking about new releases? Are we talking about the roadmap, stuff like that? And then always having time for Q&A. So if people have burning questions, especially in a large company, it may feel like there's 100 walls between them and you, and just having a open conversation where to say, hey, drop in and talk, share those things, and we'll see if it resonates with other people. Everybody obviously has a lot going on. It may not always be possible to join, which is why we record them and share them after the fact as well. And again, just encourage people to reach out. And again, early on, people are going to be hesitant, but providing that safe space and making that time to listen will help them be more engaged over time.
Mm-hmm. And this also recordings also help in working remotely, right?
Definitely.
Because a lot of us have switched to this new way of working. Do you also have any other tips on communicating while working remotely and engaging people?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between co-located work and remote work is that you have to be intentional about it. You're not going to have those accidental conversations. You're not going to overhear somebody talking to a customer and trying to explain something and stuff like that. So one thing I like to do is I drop into our support teams. We use Google Chat channels, but you can use a Slack channel, and just drop in and just seeing what the conversation's about and kind of some problems there. Because maybe it's not necessarily about a support ticket, or it's an adjacent problem to a support ticket, and just being in there and listening and providing help when possible as well can help to build that engagement and build that trust.
Thank you.
Nice. And there will be. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, and then I can ask my question next.
Sorry, what was that for? Okay. Hi, this is Gaurav. May I ask a question, Aaron?
Of course.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for the talk. It was very, very nice. It was very informative. So, my question was, how would you look at when you engage with your customers, whether that be one or many on a particular product or particular feature? Each of these, you run the risk of every customer bringing their own bias into the design, and that is influenced partly by the background, the culture, by the various demographics that they target. And something as simple as just a button on an app could have 50 different variations if you ask 50 different customers. How do you actually work with customers and actually helping them overcome this design bias? Because you may want them to actually move into a more modern direction, into a more modern territory, but they're kind of held back by these sometimes these age-old principles that they have and these age-old techniques that they have. So how do you work in such a case?
Yeah, so for me, it depends at which point you're seeking the feedback. Obviously, early on in primary research, you really want to focus on what's the problem that needs to be solved here, what challenge are you facing? And if you can tie back, like the way we've done it before is we've done that primary research, brought in those use cases and those problems to be solved, and then we bring back a potential solution. And when we're presenting that, we can reiterate, okay, hey, you mentioned this, or this is how you solve this problem, this is how you solve this problem. You see any challenges with this? Am I repeating back correctly what you had said? And I think obviously early on there can't be really any design bias because there's nothing there to be biased towards. They may have solutions in their head about how they would solve the problem. And this is both internal and external stakeholders, of course. But continuing to bring the conversation back to what is the problem, and just seeing it as feedback is really your biggest way to handle that. And then when you're presenting on the second side, it's again all about steering the conversation to they want this button over here. Why is that is it a workflow thing? Is it a preference thing? And then at some point you have to make a call for what's going to be consistent for your product, what's going to be your UX patterns going forward. And again, a tenet of UX design is the things they're most familiar with is their starting point. So maybe you'll uncover that the majority of your users uses Gmail perhaps, and they have a design pattern. So that's why everybody seems to gravitate towards that. And maybe you do or do not incorporate that, but at least understanding how they got to that position is what I try and do.
Thanks,
Great,
Alex.
thank you so much. Thank you, Gaurav, for the question also. Further questions?
Okay, yeah. So if there is nothing in the YouTube channels, and maybe from my side, Adam. So when we're talking about the internal stakeholders, right? An internal stakeholder could be, as you rightfully mentioned, right? Say your development team from the product management perspective, right? It's like the nearest your day-to-day contact, and then actually, like, not every stakeholder is equally important, I would say. So do you have a specific, and not every should be treated equally, right? So what is your take on this? Do you have a certain system or process, I don't know, mental model, how you approach this structure of like communicating with your stakeholders? You know, how do you decide on like, what is with who you have one-on-ones and with who you have like maybe like a monthly catch-ups? What is how do you approach this?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a specific framework for that, but I think, like you said, the development team, their needs are very different than your frontline team. So your development team, their needs are understanding business context, understanding use cases. So when we do a refinement session, I may, it's very important that I'm not just presenting, hey, this is a feature, hey, this is the button's going to do this, but here's the problem we're solving. Again, it comes back to providing as much supporting evidence as possible in the epics, and then driving your, encouraging them to ask questions, because a lot of questions that happen later on, if one person has a question, probably multiple do. So again, early on, it starts off with encouraging them, asking them questions about what you just talked through, asking them how it may be related to something to get their brains thinking. They may instantly be taking the little bit of context you're providing and then jumping into like how I'm going to code this. But if you can try and keep them in the problem space and keep them in the context of why we're building this, it can actually help to come up with better solutions. And sometimes because they're not necessarily directly in front of the customer, they can sometimes bring a really cool kind of outside set of eyes to challenge assumptions, which again, early on was like, just listen to me, just do it. But then I found that, it became a good way to question my own decisions. And then if they can feel their questions are being answered, or they can feel part of the process, again, they can be more engaged. And obviously engaged employees is really good. With regards to the frontline teams, that's where the product talks, or as we call it, let's talk product, are like the main focal point of those conversations, because having a one-on-one with all members of the frontline teams every month isn't scalable or realistic. But being able to have a group conversation and them knowing that there's always one coming up can be a great opportunity to engage them.
Cool, thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Alice, for your active engagement. Any other questions?
I have one question, but it may not be related to the stock per se, but it's around the product management. So if you could allow me, I'll go ahead.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Adam. So my question is, so I am from the development background. So I've been into this development background for past 7 years. I've worked on products like had multiple discussions with customers during their, requirement gathering, UATs, and everything. And now I want to make a transition towards product management, and I'm finding it quite difficult to make that transition. So I want to know what is the right steps that a person should take when a person is in development. What steps should a person take so that the transition can be successful and effective? So like I'm taking few courses on Udemy and Coursera. I'm reading about it. I'm like going to these talks and learning more about it from the people who are already in it. So what else can one do, to effectively navigate into this domain? What can we do? Any word of advice would be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So again, there's kind of two paths. There's being able to make that transition internally, or switching companies to make that transition. As a person who's hired product people, it definitely, when screening resumes, it's important to be able to demonstrate how you've done product related work. So you mentioned, you have done UAT sessions, you have done user interviews. So highlighting that, and also highlighting that internally, the more of the pieces of a product management job you can get a little bit of experience with, the better. So within a company, getting to know the other product managers, offering to help do some research on things, shadowing conversations, offering to lead conversations. Obviously, you'll need support from your direct manager to spend time on stuff like this. Sometimes it's worth putting an extra couple hours, whatever, to gain these experiences. But really, the question when hiring a product manager that I always ask is, what has this person done to show me that they will be able to do the role? And the best way to show that is by actively doing it in some way, shape, or form. So seeking out those opportunities to be involved, and then taking that opportunity once maybe that opening arises within your company.
Right, thank you. So just a follow-up question, what would be the one skill set that would make a candidate stand out if you are interviewing the person?
I think probably the biggest thing I always look for is curiosity. So being able to ask good questions and being able to really drill into something. Again, that's hard to demonstrate on a resume, but it's not super hard to demonstrate in an interview. So being able to ask questions around the product, or being able to ask questions about the company and the process, and really seeking to understand as much as possible is something that you'll need to do as a product person if you get the role.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the answer.
No problem.
Thank you so much for the questions, and Adam for the explanations. I suggest we end the streaming part of today's event, and we invite all of you to Zoom for the networking session. So we will soon stop streaming, and we will have a discussion just among ourselves. So thank you very much, Adam, for sharing all these insights with us. It was very, very interesting and exciting. And thank you everyone on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch for being together with us today. And you are kindly invited to join us now on Zoom. My colleague Utkarsha will post the link where you can join. And also we gladly invite everyone to our next week's event, same place, same time, when we will talk about interesting product management topics, such as lean road mapping and OKRs, with the co-founder and CEO of ProdPet. So thank you very much, everyone, and please join us now on Zoom. Take care.
Okay, I'll now stop streaming.